and my host university, Gujarat Forensic Sciences University, for providing me an opportunity to speak on the topic of basics of crime scene management and firearm analysis. Um, can you see the screen presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So when you talk about the crime scene is a place where the scene of offense takes place, or the where the offense has actually happened. It is also called as a physical. At the same time. Investigation is a term in Section 2H of Criminal Procedure Code, which says that investigation is technique of unearthing the crime, unearthing the evidences and the truth which are lying on the crime scene. So certain actions are required on the crime scene to ascertain the facts and collect the physical evidences which are lying on the crime scene. This is done through a proper managerial four-term skills and isolation, securing, sketching, all that are the part of crime scene management. Crime scene, the investigative officer is in charge of the crime scene and he looks after the crime scene. Accordingly, he divides the crime scene or pursues the crime scene in two formats. The first one is called as indoor crime scene and the other one is outdoor crime scene. When I say an indoor crime scene is a crime scene which is surrounded with the walls and a roof. That means an isolated area or a confined area is called as an indoor crime scene. Whereas outdoor crime scene, which doesn't have boundaries, like accidental crime scenes, they don't have boundaries. They occur on roads or highways. They are known as outdoor crime scenes. Both the crime scenes are handled differently because indoor crime scenes are less susceptible to contamination than the outdoor crime scenes, which are more susceptible to the contamination because of the elements like rain, wind, and other climatic conditions. Primary crime scene. Depending upon the location of the crime scene, you can define the crime scene as primary crime scene or secondary crime scene. When you have a primary crime scene, that means the main area or the main place where the crime has taken place, and secondary crime scene is the consecutive crime scenes. For an example, a burglary has taken place in a bank. A bank or the bank inside the bank area would become your primary crime scene, which you will be searching thoroughly. Together with that, you have secondary crime scenes like the culprits or the victims, how they reached the crime scene, how the car they have used, where they had hide their things. All that becomes an area to be searched, and they are known as secondary crime scenes. But both the areas need to be searched simultaneously for proper explorations of the crime scene. Now, the in charge officer who reaches the crime scene is called as investigative officer. When I talk about investigative officers are in charge of the crime scene, but it is said that investigative officers should never reach the crime scene within proper, which should treat each and every crime scene as fresh and unique with no exceptions. That means that is called as ABC of investigation. Assume nothing. That means once the investigative officer reaches the crime scene, he should assume nothing. For an example, when he reaches a crime scene, a victim's body is lying on the floor. He shouldn't assume whether it is a murder or a suicide. He should investigate the crime scene depending upon the facts and the subjective evidences he has received from the crime. He should go for detailed assumptions. Believe no one. This is very important because believing on eyewitnesses totally would ruin the crime scene. So believe no one, look into the scene, always listen to the scene and physical evidences. It is said that crime scene always talks to you. When you have that much of experience, the crime scene keeps talking to you, and that is called as that you should believe the instincts or the physical evidences or the scene, the configuration of scene is the one thing you should believe on. Check everything. Okay, that is the third step of the investigation. Everything which is lying on or around the crime scene should be checked for possible evidences. That is what is called as ABC of investigation, and that is the core of all the investigations. It is also expected for the IO, the investigative officers, and the forensic investigators to look into the 7S of investigation. First thing is everything should be secured on the crime scene, whether it is the smallest footprint or a lock or a key or any door, entry or exit point, everything should be secured in the best possible manner so that it doesn't get contaminated. Second is separating the witnesses. If you have multiple witnesses on the crime scene, they should be separated in a manner so that directive evidences don't occur. They don't talk to each other so that they manipulate the crime scene. Third is scanning. The third S is scanning the scene. The crime scene investigator and the forensic experts, when they reach the crime scene, they scan the crime scene. What would be the possible events? Why this would have happened? That is known as scanning the crime scene. So the fourth S is seeing the scene. Seeing the scenes means videography, photography, all that are the part of seeing the scene, and they should be secured for longer time for the reconstruction of the crime scene investigation. The fifth S is sketching the scene. The sketching of the scene should be done. Why it is a very important part of crime scene investigation S is it should be done on the crime scene itself rather than going into your rooms and doing it. So sketching, it is very important that you sketch the scene on the crime scene itself so that no evidences or no scaling or nothing is missed out when you are sketching the crime scene. Searching of the evidences, it is a rigorous pattern to search the evidences because some evidences are visually apparent and some are not visually apparent, so they should be looked for. And once you secure and look for the evidences, they should be collected in a manner that they are not contaminated or tempered for further investigation, what we call as scientific examination. When we talk about scientific examinations, they are done on the physical evidences which are recovered from the crime scene. After recovering, which is known as recognition, they are identified for possible class characteristics and individual characteristics. Class characteristics. When the term comes class characteristics, it is a characteristics which is common to a group of people, and individual characteristics is individualizing each and every person. For an example, when I say fingerprints, every human being has a fingerprints. That is a class characteristic. But when you go into loops, words, and arches of the fingerprint, they become individual characteristics when you classify them. Now, the third scientific part of examination of evidences is individualization. Individualization is when you confirmly identify the evidence and say that this would be the pattern of an evidence, and this is how you can interpret. That is called as individualization of evidence. Now, when all this is aided with the help of scientific examinations, this would help you in reconstructing the crime scene and reporting what would be the sequence of event or what would have happened on the crime scene for proper establishment. Now, this is our main part. When once the IO reaches, he barricades the crime scene. That barricading is called as isolation of the crime scene. But before isolation, he adapts a thing which is called as adapt, assess the crime scene, and assess those hurt. That means if the victim or maybe culprit is present on the crime scene and they are hurt, they need medical assistance. Detain the witnesses, as we had talked earlier. No witnesses should be allowed to talk to each other. arrest the perpetrator. That means you need to arrest the perpetrators if they are present on the crime scene. But if they need medical assistance, first they should be provided that. Protection of the crime scene. Protection of the crime scene or isolation of the crime scene is very important. In most of the cases, if it is not properly handled, both the crime scenes, primary and secondary location of the crime scene, if they are not properly handled, they may destroy the evidences which are already present, and they can help you to link to the culprit or the victims or the number of people who are present on the crime scene. So the first and the foremost step of the crime scene management is isolating the crime scene with barricading if one or multiple barrications are required. Yeah, possibly you can potential points of entry or exit can be visualized, and they can also be secured if there are any marks like fingerprints or saliva or sweat samples available. They should also be secured. No person, after isolating the crime scene, after securing the crime scene, no person, unauthorized or authorized, should be allowed without prior permission to visit the crime scene, use the laboratories of the crime scene, so that no other evidences are disturbed or added to the crime scene. In case of outdoor crime scenes, it is very important to process the track marks or pattern prints which are present as soon as possible. So that is also a way of securing. If not, you can secure that so that no contamination occurs when you're securing the crime scene. Last but not the least, it is also important to search and obtaining the conditions of the crime scene. The second part, what we were talking about, the crime scene or processing of the crime scene, is documentation of the crime scene. But before going into documentation of the crime scene, let me tell what we need to search. Search is done for basically physical evidences which are present on the crime scene. Evidences are divided into two forms. The first one is called as subjective evidence, and the second is objective evidence. Subjective evidences are also known as oral evidences. They can be taken from eyewitnesses, victims, or culprits. But physical evidences, they are present on the crime scene, which are aided with the help of scientific examinations. So objective evidence, they need to be collected and processed in forensic labs for possible scientific examinations. Physical evidences can be in many forms on the crime scene. The first one is this transient evidence. Transient evidence is that evidence which is in the air, odor, smell. They wash out very early. So as soon as the IO or the investigative officer or the forensic expert reaches the crime scene, they possibly collect the transient evidences. The second one is patent evidence. Patent evidence is like track marks, tool marks, they all are patent evidences. Conditional evidences, okay. Conditional evidences can be anything, but they help you to specifically define the sequence of event which occurred on the crime scene. For an example, a trail of blood is there on the door, and from the door it goes. So that can be a conditional evidence. It gives you a trail that the moment the victim or the culprit was in so and so manner. The fourth one is transferred evidences. Transferred evidences can be from primary transfer and secondary transfer. Primary transfer is one-to-one transfer. When a person enters into your room, it is said that according to the Locke's principle of exchange, when two people come in the same environment, there is an exchange of evidences or things which are there. Maybe saliva, maybe sweat, maybe hair samples, maybe foot patterns, maybe soil samples, anything. Transfer of evidences ought to occur in that cases, and that transfer evidences are primary, one-to-one, and secondary. Secondary transfer is different from primary. When a person visits your room and then he leaves the room and enters another room, maybe possibly he has taken some of the evidences which are there in the room to another room. That is known as secondary transfer. Last one is associative evidences, also known as personal belongings of the person. You can directly link a mobile phone. Whenever a mobile phone is lost, you ask, whose phone is this? This is known as associative evidence. It can directly link that it is my phone. Okay, so that are known as associative evidences. There is no limitation of classification of physical evidences or objective evidences. They are classified on many forms. They are classified on the basis of class characteristics, individual, maybe in this format. They are also classified on the basis of direct evidence and indirect evidence. Direct evidence are those evidences, for an example, fingerprints, DNA. Okay, they will help you to identify the person directly. And corroborative evidence, if a voice sample is obtained from the crime scene or in any manner, they are corroborative evidence. They help you to identify the person. They are helping aids, but they cannot 100% directly link the culprit or victim to that evidence. So they are known as indirect evidence or maybe corroborative evidences. Physical evidences can also be classified on the basis of nature. Nature means they are biological, chemical, or physical in nature. For an example, which you can see on the screen, blood, semen, saliva, hair samples, they all are biological samples, and they require different method to collect them. Each and every different nature element or different nature evidence require different method to be collected. If you have a blood, semen, saliva sample, they require a EDTA bulb or maybe a glass vial to be collected. Chemical evidences, as I said, they are maybe transient, so they require maybe plastic bottles or order control vials to be collected. If it is a paint or something, they can be collected inside the plastic. Hello?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for the interruption. मैम जो नीचे जो डायलॉग बॉक्स आ रहा है स्क्रीन शेयरिंग का वो हाइड कर देंगे प्लीज.
Sure, sure.
ओके मैम, थैंक यू मैम.
Okay. The third one is physical evidences. Physical evidences are in two formats. They can be in a 2D format and a 3D format. 2D prints are known as surface prints. They require cellophane tapes, photography, and other techniques to be collected. And when they are sunken prints, they have compressed marks. They are known as 3D prints, and they require casting techniques to be collected. There may be plaster of Paris casting or any dental mask casting. Any of the casting techniques can be used for this one. Together with that, there are very important evidences like voice evidences, which are also known as e-evidences or electronic evidences. Electronic evidences are processed in a very different manner than biological, chemical, or physical evidences. The second part of your crime scene investigation is documentation of crime scene. Now, this is very important. The investigative officer keeps 1 or 2% to basically document the crime scene. Documentation occurs in 4 layers. The first one is called as note taking. When you have a note taking, the arrival time, when did you get the call from the crime scene, who all reached the crime scene, what was the general location of the crime scene, what when the IO reached the crime scene, what all did he notice that was seeing on the crime scene, if the victim was present of the dead body, what is the crime scene, how many people were called for the aid, whether the forensic experts were called for aid, what did he recover, all that is a part of note taking, and it is very justified. This documentation is very important legally also, because whatever you document is presented to the crime to the court as an ideal representation of your crime scene. The second part of your documentation is videography. Overall videography, whether it is an indoor crime scene, outdoor crime scene, or maybe accounting, white collar crimes, every place should be videographed, documented with proper documentation process. The third part, which is very important and it requires court presentation, is photography. Usually photography is done with 35 mm cameras, and it is done with the help of overviews. They are done in 3 ways. Whenever you reach a crime scene, the photographer is called in. He then goes for a photography of a crime scene in 3 ways. The first one is called as overview. Means he can take an angular view of the crime scene in best possible manner, so that the whole of the crime scene and possibly the entry and the exit points are covered in the overall photography. It can be done in 2 ways. One is called as overlapping. One by one, side by side, the photographs. So the bigger crimes, the crimes are bigger in nature, larger in nature, macro crime scenes can be covered in overlapping format, and progressive, fixed point, and then fixed progressive photography is done from a fixed point, and angular movements of the camera is changed so that all the angles of the crime scene can be covered. Mid-range photography, the second part of photography. All the three photographies are done on the crime scene itself. First is overall view. The second one is mid-range photography. Mid-range photography is basically done to cover the uh, interrelation between the crime scene and the entry and exit point, and the overall view of the crime scene, which is already been covered. The third formation of photography is called as close-up photography. It is done with the evidences which are recovered on the crime scene, it with a 90-degree angle, with a scale. It is very important to measure the scale, and as seen in the second photograph, it is numbered or legends, what we call as legends. They have to be mentioned for each and every evidence which are being close up, which are being photographed with close-up photography, and these legends remain the same throughout the whole chain of custody. So, second very important point is photography. It is the cameras which are usually present on the crime scene or with the mobile lenses, 35 cameras, but normal lenses or wide angle lenses are not being used and they cannot be accorded for the photography. The fourth part, the fourth part of the documentation is sketching. Sketching is called as the ideal representation, 2D ideal representation of the crime scene. As I said earlier, it can be done in two formats, rough sketch and the final sketch. Rough sketches are basically done before the final sketch is prepared, but both the sketches are prepared on the crime scene itself. When you're sketching a crime scene, there are listed methods to sketch the crime scene. Indoor and outdoor crime scenes are sketched in two different formats. Triangular method and polar methods are basically sketched for or used methods for outdoor crime scene. And baseline, together with that, there are other methods like coordinate and extended coordinate methods, which can be used for the sketching of the crime scene. Triangular method. Triangular method, as seen, it has two reference points, and all the evidences are taken from that two reference points, that is measurements. Measurement of all the evidences are taken from that method. The second one is baseline. You have two fixed baselines, not rather than reference points. You have two fixed baseline, maybe one going x-axis and one going y-axis. And from that x and y-axis, when you take your reference lines on your evidences, that is known as baseline or fixed line method. And that can be extended with extended coordinate methods to the walls or the roofs of the ceiling in case of suicidal or some evidences which are there on the walls. Third method is polar coordinate method. This is the method basically used for outdoor crime scene, where you have one reference point, and taking into that reference point, you take an angular measurement to your evidences. That is known as polar coordinate method. So together with note taking, videography, photography, and sketching, this all together make a part of crime scene documentation, and that is very important for legal purpose, saving the crime scene for further references, that is reconstruction purpose. All the things can be documented in this format. The third important point, as we were discussing physical evidences. Now, when you reach a crime scene, ideally the crime scene is full of evidences, physical evidences. But some evidences are visually visible. You can see a mobile phone, a cup with lip prints, all that are lying on the crime scene. Okay, but some evidences like soil, footprints, bare footprints, shoe prints, they all need processing to be collected from the crime scene and identify them and link them with possible sources. So that searching technique requires a thorough search. And searching techniques are defined on the basis of indoor and outdoor crime scenes. And that is decided by the investigative officers when he keeps in charge of certain teams of people where they can go for searching of the crime scene. Searching can be occur in strip methods. Longitudinal imaginary strips are divided in an indoor crime scene, and that area is searched thoroughly, maybe twice or thrice, looking for all possible evidences. The second method which can be used is wheel or raid method. It is said that in aircraft crashes, basically they use wheel and ray method or spiral method to look into evidences in circular manner, and in spiral method it goes from in to out and out to in. Two-way searching is done to possibly look into all the physical evidences. In ray method it goes from like a wheel method, they go from in to out and out to in a given arrow or divided sections. The fourth method is grid method. Grid method is also known as cross-sectional method, as we are using lines in a horizontal and vertical format. If we use both horizontal and vertical strip method, that becomes the cross section or the grid method as seen in the photograph. And again, why it is done is in all other methods, we have to search the crime scene maybe twice or thrice to possibly look for all the evidences. In grid method, you're vertically and horizontally looking at the same place, so possibly all the evidences are covered in grid method. And the zone method, when there are when the crime scene has many zones or secondary crime scenes are multiple in the area, then you have zone methods where you divide your crime scene into quadrants, and that quadrants are searched in by a team of maybe two or three or maybe five, depending upon the quadrant zones you have divided. So all that methods, why you require a specific searching method is for a proper evaluation of the crime scene, and so that no evidence on the crime scene is left unturned. The fourth one or the last part, now you have searched the crime scene, you know where the evidences are lying. Okay, so you need to label them with the legends, photograph them with the scale with close-up photography and the condition they are lying. Now you need to collect them, okay, for possible forensic investigation or what you call as scientific examinations. All the physical evidences can be scientifically examined and can give an opinion depending upon the nature of the evidence which has been collected. So collection differs for each and every evidence. If I go into the collection, there are many methods of collection, but if you have biological evidences, they can be collected in vials. Okay, if you have chemical evidences, they can be collected in plastic bottles or maybe druggist fold. All are prescribed. If you have hair samples, they can be collected in druggist fold. If you have a weapon, a scene, you can collect it in a plastic container, label it. But before collection, it should mention that evidences like hair and all should be collected with a forceps, which is covered with a grip, so that no tampering is done on. All the evidences should be collected in the same manner. If you have a blood sample, you can collect it with scraping if it is dry. If it is wet, you can go with swabbing. It is also photographed and then it is sent to the forensic laboratory for serological or possible DNA examinations. So there are variety of packaging material which are available for collection, securing. In cases of blood-soaked clothing or something which is blood-soaked, like or maybe biological evidence is present on the bed sheets, you need to air dry. Don't keep it in the sun, but you need to air dry the evidence which is present. You need to air dry the biological evidence which is present, and then it is collected in a paper envelope and sent to the forensic lab for further examination. And all this is maintained with the help of chain of custody. Chain of custody is something which turns from the crime scene to the courtroom. How you have maintained. Once the legends are mentioned on the sketch and on the photographs, they cannot be tempered. And they have to be mentioned in the same format. And each and every evidence is marked with a unique reference number, what we call as URN. And that URN is linked to your FIR number, the place and the location, time, everything. And the chain of custody is possibly done with once all the evidences are collected and they are ready to be sent to the forensic lab. but they are sealed in the front of investigative officers, and possibly the panchnama, what we call panchas, the highly socialized people, they sign it on the evidences that so and so evidences was collected in their presence and no tampering was done when the evidence was collected. So this is what is called as chain of custody. The same evidence once collected is sent to the forensic labs for examination. They also mention the sample number or the exhibit number or what you call as unique reference number to form a report. They come out with a scientific examination of the report. That report relates to the evidences which are collected, and together everything, photographs, notes, sketching, chain of custody list, that is in note taking, forensic examinations or what we call as scientific examinations, all together are supportive documents and they are submitted to the court for possible crime scene investigation, reconstruction, and coming out with the penalty and fixing the culprits and the culprit which is who has done the crime. The last part, the investigative officers or the possibly many people together which are the responsible or visited the crime scene go for crime scene reconstruction in six different manners. The step one is the state problem, the type of crime and legal elements which are present. The second one is collecting the data, the witnesses, the interview victim, the suspects, and the witnesses, what they said, how you can link them with the crime scene. All that data is recollected, okay, and they are set with the crime scene. Formation of hypothesis. This is something which is done by the investigative officer. He looks into the evidences and says that this may be the motive, or this may be the sequence of events which have taken place, or they may be the possible suspects. This form of hypothesis is then applied to the truth hypothesis with the physical evidences and the oral evidences which you have collected, and then the final theory is being formulated, okay, and the conclusion is drawn. For an example, as seen in the photograph, the bullet enters from a hand, arm area to the chest. First of all, when you reach the crime scene, maybe he has assumed that there would be two gunshots. But after formation of the hypothesis and test hypothesis, it was reduced to that only one shot was fired, which entered through the arm area to the chest. So this is what is called as theory formulation. The actual theory formulation comes when the hypothesis, test hypothesis is solved with the help of examination of evidences, both the evidences, physical and oral evidences. And then the conclusion are drawn, are presented to the court for possible punishments. And you need to prove whatever the theory formulations are there. Sanjeev, can I go on, or you need to ask the questions for the crime scene? Hello? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. You can
Sanjeev?
go on, ma'am. We can.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. We can go.
If anyone wants to ask question related to crime scene, we can solve it out here, or I can complete firearm analysis and then we can move forward.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, they can ask the question after this session.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So forensic ballistics, or what we
No,
call
ma'am, at the session we will allow them. Hello. Ma'am.
Okay, Sanjeev. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, the second part of my presentation or overview of what we are discussing today is forensic ballistics. Forensic ballistics is a science which goes with firearms. Firearms, as we all know, is a device, and that device deals with motion, behavior, and effects of projectile. So ballistics is nothing but the science, physics, which deals with motion, behavior, and effects of projectiles. And that, for instance, and when you apply this knowledge of behavior, how the bullet moves, what would be the energy required, how did it hit the target, effects of projectile, whether there was a blasting effect or not. When you apply all this knowledge of ballistics to solve a crime related to firearms or explosions, they are called as forensic ballistics. And forensic ballistics, for our understanding convenience or to learn the motion, behavior, and effects of projectile and the working of firearm, It is divided into three major forms. They are known as internal ballistics, external ballistics, and terminal ballistics. When you have internal, external, and terminal ballistics, internal, uh, internal, external, and terminal ballistics. Internal ballistics is the interplay of firearms and ammunitions. What is a firearm? It is a device projectile. Projectiles are nothing but they are in two forms. They can be a solid core bullet, which we call it as a bullet, or maybe multiple shots, which we call as shots, or maybe slug shots. Okay, so they are a form part of projectile which are present in the ammunition, and this ammunition is fired from the firearm. So the interplay, the ammunition is loaded, the firearm fires. That interplay is called as internal ballistics. The second part is called as external ballistics. This is very important when you come for reconstruction of the crime scene. After the bullet hits the target, where did it flew from? Whether it was deflected bullet or not, whether it ricocheted, whether there was a yaw in the bullet, all that trajectory computation is a part of external ballistics. And the third one, which we call as terminal ballistics. When I define terminal ballistics, I define it in two ways: terminal ballistics and wound ballistics. When your bullet or your projectile hits a living target, I consider it as a wound ballistics. Whether it is an animal or a human being, it doesn't matter. But it creates injuries, specific injuries, maybe incised wounds, which help you to reconstruct and identify the range of fire. That are known as wound ballistics. And terminal ballistics is termination of or end of the journey of your projectile in some non-living surface. They are known as terminal ballistics. They don't create wounds. They have just incised. They have just a terminated end of your trajectory. Together with that, I have gone through many notes which says that there is another ballistics which where the external and the internal ballistics don't play a role. That is known as intermediate ballistics. That is the fourth subgroup of your forensic ballistics. Intermediate ballistics is something. You have a firearm. The open end of the firearm, as soon as the bullet, which we call as muzzle end, as soon as the bullet leaves the muzzle end of the firearm, it is surrounded by hot gases, which we call as muzzle blast. That muzzle blast does not allow the gravitational pull or the trajectory to be formed so early. So when your projectile is surrounded with hot gases, the environmental conditions don't play a role, and there is a jump and vibration do play a role when there is an intermediate ballistics, and that is what we call as the fourth part of ballistics, which is intermediate ballistics. For a forensic ballistic expert, it is very important to know all the four ballistics. Then only he will be able to reconstruct the firearm related cases. Now, these are the components of ballistics. What are the components? You are ought to find a firearm, not on the crime scene with the culprit, maybe later on. You are ought to find the ammunition in the form of cartridge case and bullet after the ammunition has been fired. And the third one is the target. You cannot see the trajectory once it is be fired. Once you reconstruct this crime scene, then only you will be able to see the external ballistics or the trajectory. So firearm, ammunition, and target, these are the most important components of forensic ballistics. As we were discussing, here is a picture of a pistol which shows you what are the parts of the firearm, but I'm not going into details because each and every part would have different values. But the most important for us to know, or the terminologies we should know, is muzzle. Muzzle end is the front or end of the elongated tube, which we call it as a barrel. The second part, or the rear end, is called as um, the rear end of the muzzle end and breech end. The rear end of your elongated tube is called as breech end, where there is a chamber, and the breech block. The breech block, which is a solid block at the end of your barrel, is comprises of a firing pin, and that firing pin is directly linked to the trigger. This is a magazine. As you see, magazine is nothing but a storehouse of your live ammunition. What is an ammunition? This is what we call as an ammunition. This is what we call as an ammunition. When you talk about when you talk about a firearm, okay, they can be in two forms: rifle firearms and shotgun firearms. We are talking about standard firearms. There are other firearms also which are there, country made, and but they can also be classified on the basis of rifling and smooth bores. Okay, so the firearm or the barrel which has rifling, okay, they have lines and grooves inside the internal structure of the barrel. They are known as rifle firearms. And the smooth bore barrels which do not have any rifling, and they fire possibly shots from such guns. And the rifle firearms, they fire bullets from the such guns. They are different in their working and the peripheries. Why the rifling is provided in rifle firearm is to help or purpose of gyroscopic motion for the bullets which are being fired, or what we call as simply spin, which is provided for the bullet to take a flight in external ballistics, is what is called as riflings. And shotguns, they are smooth bore weapons, and they can fire multiple single shots, and they don't require much of gyrostatic motions because there are n number of shots coming out. Instead of rifling, such shotguns have choking, which helps you for reducing the dispersion of shots. So you define it any kind of firearm, or you can classify them on the basis of their barrel condition. This is called as barrel condition, and they can be classified on the basis of rifle and shotguns. Now, second part of your internal ballistics, or what you need to know about ballistics, is ammunition. How does your ammunition work? You have a bullet, okay, which is at the end of your cartridge, okay. The bullet is backed with a powder which we call as secondary explosive charge, or secondary powder, or a propellant charge, possibly made up of black powder or maybe nitroglycerin and nitrocellulose. This charge is called as the main charge, and it is being filled inside the cartridge case. Now this cannot burn itself. Okay, you require extra weighing force or maybe a flash to burn this charge because they are not that highly pressure sensitive. To make this main burn, it is backed with a primer percussion cap, which is filled with a primer mixture. Primer mixtures can be n number of type. For an example, mercury formulate, which is highly pressure sensitive. Now this percussion cap, which is called as primer, percussion cap is filled with primer mixture, which when embedded with pressure from the firing pin creates flashes, and which in turn burns the main charge. This main charge then produces kinetic energy. That kinetic energy allows the pressure to build in, and no, first the pressure is built in. That pressure is converted into kinetic energy by pushing your projectile out of the chamber to the barrel and then into the trajectory. So that is how it moves. It is pushed out from the ammunition to the barrel. The barrel goes for the spinning effect with the help of lance and grooves, and then it is pushed out into the trajectory, what we call as external ballistics, and then it goes and hits the target depending upon the velocity, distance, and other conditions of the target and of the trajectory. So this is what we call as the anatomy of the cartridge. So a cartridge is a house of projectile which is backed, and the movement or the momentum of the projectile is provided with the help of propellant, which is and this propellant is burned with the help of the flash hole, which flashes which are produced from the primer mixture, which are present in the percussion gap. The same thing is a replica in the shotgun cartridges, which you can see on the right side of the right side of your screen, which is a red color cartouche. Okay, but this is usually the rifled cartridges are made up of metal shells, whereas the shotgun cartridges are made up of cardboards or papers, but they remain the same. The projectile, which is in shotgun, as we discussed, the projectiles are shots. They are packed with weights to hold the pressure, and below the weights is the main charge. That main charge is burned or allowed the with the flash which is produced from the primer mixture. So everything is interconnected and they become a whole house which we call as live ammunition. Once the ammunition is fired, you cannot find the bullet or the shots embedded inside the ammunition. Only the shell is found, what we term as cartridge case, and the projectile can be a bullet or the shots. So firearm, ammunition, which you can see here, A, B, C, D. We did discussed how it works, and then is your ammunition. Now, these are the types of bullets which can be fired, possibly fired, but I'm not going into types of bullets because we are going into mechanism of fire and what are the forensic examination evidences which we can recover from the crime scene. So once you press the once you press the trigger, this is known as cycle of operation also or mechanism of fire. Okay. So once you press the trigger, the firing pin goes and hits the base of the ammunition, which is lying inside the chamber of the firearm. This ammunition hits the percussion cap. Okay. It produces flashes. That flash in turn burns the main charge, as you can see in the second photo, and then in turn it creates pressure. That pressure is converted into kinetic energy, and that kinetic energy provides a pushback effect to your projectile, which gives the momentum to the projectile, and the bullet goes and hits the target after taking its journey through the barrel and in the air. Now, after the firearm has been fired, what are the possible evidences you will find on the crime scene? The first one is firearm. Firearm, the location of the firearm may be on the crime scene or with the culprit. You may find it later on with the culprit or the suspects, or it may be lying on the crime scene. Now, how you will collect that? The firearm is collected with once the searcher wears the glove, he can collect the crime scene. He brushes on the firearm with powder charge so that possibly if any firing fingerprint marks are there, they can be collected with the help of tapes. And if not, then he clocks the muzzle end, then he opens the firearm, looks into if any live ammunition or fired cartridge case is lying inside the chamber. He opens up the magazine and the magazine is not loaded again, and all the live ammunitions are removed from the magazine and they are packed individually. Then he ons the safety and clocks the muzzle line after all the things are being photographed, labeled, and the chain of custody is maintained. The second part is projectile or the shots. The possible location of projectile, which can be in the form of bullets or shots, can be on the target or maybe on a non-living thing or maybe on the object on the crime scene. Anywhere they can be to, and they need to be collected for further examination. Now, bullets have specific, after they have been fired, they have specific fingerprint marks, what we call as LEA and GEA area with minutiae. LEA is line and grooved area, and GEA is grooved and grooved area, engraved area, which helps you to determine which are also known as the fingerprint areas of the bullet. Why we call it fingerprint areas? Because as human beings can be determined with the help of fingerprints, bullets can be determined with the help of the LEA and GA and the minutiae which are present on the bullets. The third, and this needs to be collected from the surfaces or from the victim's body, and they are sent to forensic laboratory for further examination. We call it as a linkage. Okay, what examinations we carry out from the projectile is the linkage. You can link the bullets with the possible firearm. It is possible to link 100% if your bullet is intact or maybe deformed slightly. It is possible for a forensic ballistic expert to link the bullet with your possible firearm. The third part is cartridge case. When you have the cartridge case can be inside the weapon if the weapon is found. In cases of semi-automatic and automatic firearm, the cartridge cases are found on the crime scene, lying on the crime scene. They are also known as shells. Okay, so these shells need to be corrected. As you can connect the bullet with the firearm, You can connect the cartridge case with the firearm, and this also helps in identifying what was the caliber of the firearm, what could be the make and model. All that can be identified with the cartridge cases. Okay. The fourth one is gunshot residue. This can be on target or on the crime scene, or we call it as barrel wash inside the firearm. So all that gunshot residues, which are residues from the burnt primer, propellant, and the greasing of the projectile, which is a combination of maybe nitrates, antimony, barium, lead. Okay, all that together residues make gunshot residues. Gunshot residues can be in different form. If you see a blackening, that is also a deposition of gunshot residues on the target, but they are burnt gunshot residues. But when you see tattooing, small particles adhering around the target, okay, around the incised wound or the entry wound, they are known as semi-burnt or unburnt particles of the primer and the propellant mixture, probably. And the fifth part is target. Okay, target helps you to determine the entry and exit point. Okay, and it also helps you to determine which kind of weapon was used, how many weapons were used. As I said, we can link the bullets and the cartridge cases with the firearm. You can, when you reconstruct the evidences and formulate your hypothesis, you can say how many people were involved, how many firearms were used, what is the caliber of the firearm which is used, whether it is a licensed weapon or unlicensed weapon. Because licensed weapons are basically available in the market, you can say whether it is commonly used weapon or not. That's what I mean by licensed and unlicensed weapon, commonly used or not, a service rifle or not. All that can be help you to reconstruct the crime scene. And the entry and exit point, in case all these evidences are not there, but if you find a target where your projectile is embedded in, that also helps you to reconstruct the crime scene, like time since fire, the blood clogging in, or the position of the bullet, or as we discussed, the different range show different gunshot residues. Um, um, what we call as blackening and tattooing pattern. Different range on the target show different blackening and tattooing pattern, and they help you to determine the range of fire. And the last one is weds. Weds are found basically in smoothbore weapons on the crime scene, or maybe around the target sometimes when there is a close distance firing, or in cases of contact shot, you find the weds inside the target. So all these evidences are ought to be present in the firearm cases. They may or may not be present, but targets, bullets, cartridge cases, projectiles are found on the crime scene when a firearm case takes place. Or as we have discussed, handling and collection and packaging of firearms. How do you handle them? Okay, so when the firearm is recovered, we already discussed, but we need to the note taking person also writes the type and make. Even the forensic experts write the type and the make, serial number, and caliber. Now how do you measure the caliber? When you talk about caliber, rifle firearm have are designated as calibers, and smoothbore firearms, if recovered, they are designated in the form of bores. Rifle firearms. Rifle firearms, when you measure the internal diameter from land to land in cases of rifle firearms, they help you to determine the caliber of your firearm, like 9 mm, 8 mm, 7.62. They are all the caliber of the firearms. And when you measure the internal diameter of a smoothbore weapon, they help you to determine the bore of your firearm. That is not equal to the bore, but it is equal to the diameter of the bore. D cube is equal to 4.567 divided by n, when n is your bore number. Now, what is a bore number? 1 pound of lead ball is when it is divided into 12 equivalent pieces of, you create a shots of equal diameter and equal weight, that gives you 12 bore. So when you have a lead ball of you divide it into n number of pieces, with equal diameter and equal size, equal weight, what I mean to say is it will give you n bore. And that n bore, when stated in this formula, d cube is equal to 4.567, it will give you the possible diameter of your weapon, smooth bore weapon. Okay, so this is how you determine the caliber on the crime scene itself. Now, the second one is bullets. Now, when you have a dead body, which has a targeted bullet, okay, you can take an X-ray to determine where the bullet is lying, and then the forensic medical legal expert removes the bullet from the dead body. But in case of living target, this becomes very difficult. In case of dead bodies, even the target area, what we call as entry and exit points, if present, they are also collected and sent to the forensic laboratory for further examination. In cases of living targets, only the X-rays are taken and then the bullet is removed from the body. Fired bullets, they are collected in plastic boxes or envelopes, and bullets from the dead bodies, as we discussed, we need to go for an X-ray. Now, while we were discussing how do we do the linkage, what the forensic ballistic expert do is link the bullet and the cartridge case with the firearm in the laboratories. Now, how does it do that? Once the cartridge case and bullets are collected, maybe from the body or from the crime scene, they are sent to the forensic lab. If the firearm is recovered, you go for a test fire from the firearm and they are recovered from the recovery box. This recovery box then leads, they help you to recover the firearm, they help you to recover the bullets, and that bullets are called as test bullets. These test bullets are compared on the basis of class characteristics, individual characteristics, and then the conclusions are drawn. So as we discussed, class characteristics. In cases of bullets, if they are from the same caliber, okay, and they bear same amount of riflings, okay, riflings means LEA and GEA, then they can be possibly compared for individual characteristics, what we call as minutiae between the LEA and GEA, and then the conclusions are drawn and the confirmation of identification is done in the lab. This seems to be very easy, but when you go for examination, when I'm speaking, it seems to be, but when you go for final examination, it is difficult. So this is how they go for comparison. Okay. The second part is cartridge case. When you recover a cartridge case from the crime scene, you go for possible examination. Okay. Once you have test fired from the firearm, you collect that test fired cartridge and compare it with the question cartridge case which you have recovered from the crime scene. Why do you do that? To identify whether the question cartridge is fired from the same firearm which is recovered from the suspect or from the crime scene. This is the linkage. Okay. So as you can see on the screen, this is the breech, the above, and the below is the percussion cap area or the backside, the head stamp area of your cartridge case. You can see possibly the transfer of marks. Why this transfer occurs? According to the principle of 2 marks, harder objects leave the marks on the softer ones. So the harder object, which is the firearm, transfers the minute markings or embossements which are there on the cartridge cases. So as the firing pin strikes, you can see a compressed marks, which we call as firing pin mark. These are known as breech face marks. You have breech face marks which are transferred from the breech face block of your firearm to the base of your cartridge case. Together with that, the surface of the cartridge case have chamber marks, possibly in semi-automatic and automatic firearm, which have extractor and ejector for loading and unloading of the cartridge case. Such marks are also transferred on the rim area of your cartridge case. They are known as extractor and ejector marks. So this is what bullet marks are, what we were discussing. This slide shows the marks which are present on the cartridge cases and how do we compare and how the forensic experts frame an opinion. So when you have a cartridge case, both have the same class characteristics. You use a comparison microscope for comparing firing pin marks, breech face marks, chamber marks, extractor and ejector marks. Okay, and bullet, as we discussed, they pass through the grooves which are present in the barrel, and that grooves are transferred on the bullet in the form of LE and GE. So groove impression make grooved and grooved area, and line impression makes line engraved area, and they are possibly transferred on the bottom of your bullet or the projectile, and then they are being compared under comparison microscope for examinations. For forensic ballistic experts in the labs, these are the instruments which are available. Usually, to visualize the internal surface of the barrel, we use boroscopes, which help you to go into the minute details of the barrels or to visualize the internal surface of your firearm. Okay. Second one is comparison microscope. As we were discussing about cartridge cases and bullets, they need to be compared under comparison microscope. Comparison microscope is a specially designed microscope for the side-by-side comparison of test evidence and the question evidence, which are to be tested for their individual characteristics. After class characteristics, individual characteristics. Now, the rest two systems which are being used in ballistics precisely is integrated ballistics identification system. This is an automatic data concentrator system which allows you to create images, extract images of your fired cartridge cases and bullets, and go for comparison later on. And it also helps you for automatic comparison. So IBIS is basically divided into three basic parts: bullet tracks, brass tracks. Brass tracks is for cartridge cases. Bullet tracks is for bullets, and match point, which allows you for comparison from the data which is already stored. IBIS, which is available in Directorate of Forensic Science, is linked to 5 other IBIS which are available in India, and all can be data concentrated. The registered cases from them and from here can be visualized and look for possible same characteristics of cartridge cases, that is firing pin marks and breech face marks, and bullet marks, which are there, striation marks. Now, BDAS, the last one which we use for ballistic examination precisely is Ballistic Data Acquisition System, BDAS. Also, in replacement of BDAS, nowadays we see IR gates. This basically instrument is used to measure the velocity of the firearm which is recovered, or a velocity of the ammunition which is to be fired. So basically it has a universal receiver and IR gates which help you to measure different level velocity and even the target velocities. Now, you know how the cartridge cases and bullets are used. GSR which is collected can possibly use to identify the range of fire, the time of fire, when you go for examinations under EDXRF, maybe energy dispersive X-ray fluorescence techniques. There are many techniques which are available like ICP-AAS, and all of the techniques help you to determine the composition, qualitative, quantitative, from which range it is fired, what would be the possible time of firing, can be determined from the help of GSR. Target, which is the fourth element of your ballistic examination, is target. Targets help you to determine entry and exit wounds. They help you to determine which kind of firearm is being used, from what distance, range of firing. Range of firing is a concept which is very important to reconstruct a crime scene. So range of firing helps you to determine, can be determined from the entry and exit point. Entry points have certain characteristics which are known as blackening, tattooing, ecchymosis, and all that, which help you to determine the entry wound, whether yaw has taken place or not. All that help you, the shape of your wound, okay, all that help you to determine the range of fire. Range of fire is the distance between the muzzle end and the target. They are basically divided into 4 ranges. One is called as blank shot or the contact shot. The second one is close distance firing, near distance, and distance firing. As the distance increases, the periphery or the characteristics on the target keeps on changing, and that characteristics help you to determine whether from what distance the target was hit with the from the muzzle line. So this is how it helps you to determine or reconstruct the crime scene in cases of firearm analysis. Should I continue, Sanjeev, or I should end here because I have a
मैम
case study to discuss.
मैम आप कंटिन्यू कर सकते हैं मैम केस स्टडी.
Because it is already, I think it is already 1:39.
Yes ma'am.
No issues?
No issues ma'am, no issues.
Okay. So last thing, I'd like to um, there's one question from someone which is saying that what is the boroscope used for? As I said, a boroscope is an elongated tube-like structure which has a camera at the time and a lightning source, and it allows you to visualize the internal surface of the firearm to check whether the riflings are in proper condition. There is no rustring. Even boroscopes are used in cases like keyholes and all that to visualize surfaces where your eye cannot reach. In such cases, boroscopes are being used. The next last part of my session, I've gone into the overview of what is crime scene and firearm, what are the parts of what are the firearm analysis do or analysts do. But I like to discuss I like to end my session with a case discussion where it includes both the crime scene and the firearm analysis. Both the parts are included in this case study. There was a very well-known assassination of John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963 in Dallas, where he was going in a car on a rally, okay, and with the governor and his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy. All the three were seated. The governor was sitting in the front, and Mr. Kennedy and his wife were sitting on the backside seat. Now, when you see the visualization, the assassination was done by Lee Howard Oswald, and he fired two shots of bullet from the sixth floor of library where he could see the road where the procession was going on. First shot he missed out, and the second shot, if you see the course of bullet, I was discussing that the bullet can go into any course. Okay, so if you see the course of the bullet which was fired, it took a course from the backside area to the shoulder, then it took out from the chest area, then he hit the person or what we call as the governor who was sitting in the front on his wrist area, then it entered the right side shoulder and passed from the nipple, and then he entered the thigh. So one single bullet entered into so many areas, okay, and created wounds, multiple wounds, what we call as. Now, how you will reconstruct such crime scene is, this was known as magic bullet. There were 4 times the crime scene was reconstructed because it was not believed that one bullet can give you so many wounds. Okay, but after reconstruction, it was this bullet was named as magic bullet, and one single bullet could create 5 individual wounds on 2 persons sitting front and back. Okay, so this is how the horizontal and the lateral view goes. Now, why I'm giving this example is, whenever you have a crime scene, if you assume that there were 5 firearms and 5 shots were fired, you couldn't have come down to this hypothesis or formulation that one single bullet can create so many wounds. Okay, and the second thing which is there is multiple wounds. When they reconstructed, they found we reconstruct, we take a stick-like structure to identify the trajectory of the bullet or the movement of the bullet. So they could find that this bullet could be interlinked, and they stated that gunshot residue, they couldn't find any of the gunshot residue, no characteristic patterns on any of the wounds. So they stated that one wound can create multiple wounds. So this is what the bullet they have recovered. This is how you go for close-up photography, which was totally deformed bullet from the left elbows. And this was the firearm which was recovered from Lee Oswald, who had gone for this. Was the autopsy which was carried out. This was the first picture shows the neck area injured. The second one shows a bullet, Why this is elongated is due to the oblique shape of the bullet. Usually, when there is a near distance firing, you see a round wounds, but in distant firings, because it was from the sixth floor from the library, you saw oblique or an oval wound because the yaw has come in. Your bullet starts standing up and dropping down. So that is what is called as a oblique wound. So this is I'm not going much into detail because I've already taken much of time. So this was the case which I wanted to discuss. So this is how they have reconstructed. See, if you see the red line going, they're trying to reconstruct the crime scene with what we they have come out with the discovery of magic bullet. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any questions,
Dear,
please?
dear participants, you are allowed to ask a questions one by one. Please unmute your mics and then ask a questions. Okay. Dear participants, anyone want to ask a questions?
Ma'am, can I?
Yeah,
Yes.
sure. Please.
Ma'am, how does the flash hole works
Flash
for the
hole.
firearm?
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
flash hole is part of an anvil, which is a place between your main charge and your percussion cap. Okay, there can be a single flash hole or multiple flash hole. A flash hole allows the flashes which are produced from the primer composition to enter into the main charge.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Ma'am, Diksha Sharma want to
Hmm.
ask a questions about just a minute.
Hmm. क्या है?
Ma'am, how a bullet can target a lot of body parts? Isn't there any effect on its velocity?
Yeah, the velocity keeps on decreasing, but there must be any striking force which allowed the bullet to take a ricochet. There is a different deflation of the bullet which we call as ricochet. Okay,
Hmm,
so once it strikes one angle, maybe with the force, there is a bouncing effect which allows it to penetrate into some other target. That can also happen in cases of multiple wounds.
yes, ma'am. Another question from Anina German. Ma'am, explain the coordination between the police personnel and the forensic scientists at a crime scene.
Coordination, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about police person, they are the first one or first responder on the crime scene. Whenever they reach the crime scene, they identify, they go for ABCs and all that securing of the crime scene, and then before searching the crime scene, they call in the first search the crime scene or to identify the evidential values of the evidences which are present on the crime scene. So they collaboratively work for better searching and better scientific examination of the crime scene.
Ma'am, another question.
Mhm.
Mukherjee is asking, what is singeing with respect to ballistic?
Singeing of
Yes,
hair.
yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
singeing of hair is something a phenomena which is seen in close distance firing. Okay, whenever the flash holes, which where we were talking about muzzle blast, so they are hot gases and flashes which are coming out from the muzzle line. Whenever they are coming out from the muzzle line, and when the target is in a close proximity with these flames and hot gases, there is a burning effect which we call as burning, which is seen around the target, but the hairs which are made up of protein, they form a bead like structure around the target. Okay, that is known as singeing of hair. That can only occur when the hot surfaces come in contact. So that is a specific phenomena which you can see in close distance firing only.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question by Priyanka.
Mm.
When the tattooing effect can be seen, is this effect is depend upon the distant or a gun?
Yes, the tattooing effects or the characteristics or the what you call the proportionations of tattooing helps you to determine the range or the distance of firing.
Ma'am,
As
yes,
the range increases, the tattooing pattern is more dispersed and the particles ratio decreases.
yes, ma'am. Ma'am, last question.
Yeah.
Dear participant, anyone want to ask a questions? Dear participants?
Hello, yes, sir.
Yes,
You
yes.
can.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you for the session.
Yes,
Ma'am,
thank you. Yeah.
does all the searching methods are suitable to all types of crime scenes?
What you said?
Uh,
Repeat the question, please. Sorry.
does the searching methods you said spiral,
Searching.
zonal methods?
Yeah, it depends on the type of crime scene. As I said, indoor and outdoor crime scene are entirely different in their location and the area which is to be covered. So basically, prescribed crime scenes for outdoor is wheel, spiral, because you have more area to be covered. Whereas when indoor crime scene, you have a boundary which needs to be searched. So in that method, you can use zones, strips, which have a confined periphery to be searched. So all the crime scenes which are present are searched in one or the either methods.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, another question from Anjali.
Mhm.
What is the difference between yaw and precision?
Yaw and
Precision.
precision.
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
precision is very big term. Yaw is something which is related to trajectory of the bullet. When the bullet takes its flights, as the distance goes on, due to the air resistance and gravitational pull coming into force, the bullet which is in its nose on position starts standing up. That standing up of the bullet is called as yaw.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, another question from Sri Lakshmi Krishna. Ma'am, in case of a bullet ricochet, is
Hmm.
it necessary that the bullet must come out?
Come out, matlab?
Ma'am, question mark डाला है, I think.
Come out, I don't understand the word come out. Come out of the muzzle line
Yes,
or come
ma'am.
out from the target.
I think come out from the muzzle end, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am. Come out of the body. That's what I meant.
from the target or from the body.
From the body.
Ricochet can occur in any condition, from the target, from the body. If it strikes your bones, very possible. That is not termed as a ricochet, but the ricochet can occur when there is an obstruction in the trajectory of your bullet. That helps you, that gives a deflation to your trajectory. That is known as ricochet.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, another question from Kirtani. What are the difference between the close distance firearm and long distance firearm?
Long distance firearm or firing?
Firearm. She has mentioned firearm, ma'am.
Maybe she's talking about barrel characteristic, about what we call as handguns and shoulder
Yes, ma'am.
guns.
Yes, ma'am.
That is a classification of guns. Short barrel guns are known as shotguns, and long barrel firearms are known as long guns. Depending upon the bullet which has been fired or ammunition which you want to fire, and to look into the velocity which is created, and to stabilize the projectile, you need to identify whether it is a whether you want to use a short barrel or a long barrel firearm. That is the difference between the two.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, another one question.
Hello,
Yes,
Yes.
please.
mom. This is Maxwell.
Yeah, Maxwell, let me know.
Mom, in cases wherein you recover a firearm from the crime scene,
Yeah.
and then you have also recovered the fired bullet.
Yes.
However, you find out that the firing pin, for example, of the firearm is deformed.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm asking,
Yeah,
how
I got your
how
point. How you are
how
going to go for a test fire, right?
I mean, not test firing necessarily. How reliable
Yeah.
if you
So
decide to use
in case the
casting
firing
technique
pin is
to
being disturbed, see, Maxwell, when you recover a bullet, okay,
hmm,
when you change the firing pin, the bullet marks are not going to change. Do you agree to it?
if I do what?
If you change the firing pin or you remove the firing pin, the barrel marks which are there, the
No, no,
LENG,
no.
the
It
line,
will not change. It will not
will
change.
not change. So what you
Yes.
have to do is you have to go for a test fire from that one, okay? And you said you recover a bullet from the crime scene and a
Yes.
bullet from the test fire. They can be compared for the possible marks.
Yeah, but with damaged firing
Now,
pin.
and listen to me now. From with the
Okay.
damaged firing pin, it is
Hmm.
possible to go for firing of an ammunition with external force, which can be applied with the help of a screw jack or something. What
Okay.
your firing pin does is applies pressure. So
Yes.
external pressure can be applied on the base of the ammunition, which helps
Yes.
you to strike the firing pin. In
Okay.
this case, only the firing pin marks and the breech fakes marks cannot be compared. All other marks can be compared for possible linkage.
Okay, ma'am. Now, mom, there was this case wherein the firing pin and then the trigger also were deformed. So the ballistics expert decided to use casting technique to obtain the LEA and then GEA marks from the barrel
Yeah, yeah.
and then compared it
Yeah,
with
it
the
is
recovered
possible.
bullet.
Nowadays, they go for alginate casting of the
Okay.
bullets so that it can be kept for a longer period of time. In case you get such marks, you can be replicated. Because after examination, the bullet needs to be surrendered to the police investigating officer again. So in
Right.
such cases, nowadays the forensic experts go for casting of that bullets. So it is possible to cast the internal riflings of the barrel and the
Hmm.
cast the bullet, and then you can go for comparison of the casted internal barrel and the bullet too.
Mom, is it reliable
Not
with
much
no
reliable because
questions?
it has been seen that it goes for 10 to 15% of the error rate. The very
Okay.
minutiae, LE and GE has no problem. That is what we mean. But the minutiae, the
Hmm.
styrations,
Hmm.
peculiarities are lost when you go for casting. So it is
Okay.
not much reliable. When you are framing an opinion, it is not reliable. But for the purpose of research and other opinions, you can use that
Okay.
castings.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, last two more questions, ma'am,
Okay.
from Sauroshi. In case of a bank robbery, which will be a better as a search method? If question nothing extra information is there, then how to decide? Can you choose simply? Uh,
Uh, Nothing. I think if I was a IO, it depends on the investigative officer also and how you see and scan the scheme. But if I was a IO and I was given a bank robbery case, I would have gone for a zonal method because when you see a system of the bank, it is divided into compartments. So that compartments can become zones, and that zones can be searched for evidences.
yes, ma'am. Ma'am, another question from Ashish Desai. How the gunpowder develop in a cloth and hand? Develop
Gunpowder developed.
in cloth and hand.
Okay, developed or gunpowder is collected?
Ma'am, develop.
Developed.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Gunpowder cannot be developed. It needs to be collected, what we call as residues. Residues are present on your skin, on the skin of the shooter, and on the clothing of the shooter, what we call as shooter identification. Okay. That helps to identify who has gone for the shooting. And that can be collected with varied methods. The clothings, the GSR present on the clothings, the clothings are collected in self, okay, and in case of GSR present on the skin, okay, that we can go for dry and wet method. Dry method is something with the help of cellophane tapes. You can lift the residues if you can see. And wet method, when you wash your hand with 10% HCl. There is another method which we call as casting method. You use molten wax and lift up the GSR, and then you can go for spot test to identify and quantify whether antimony, lead, barium, nitrite, nitrates are present or not.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, from another question from Richa Gautam. What is the effect of a silencer on a tattooing?
Silencer on tattooing. No, there is no effect of silencer on tattooing. The silencer affects the muzzle glass and the sound which is being produced, and it affects the jump and vibration, which is the internal ballistics part.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am,
Yes.
last question from Srija.
Yes.
Photographic paper for a walker test are using nowadays. Is it visible now? Is it available now? Photographic
Photographic paper for
walker test.
walker's test. Yes, it is available.
Dear participants, any more
They go
questions?
for photographic paper and heat that photographic paper to go for Walker's test. There are different reagents which are being used.
Sure, ma'am. Dear participants, any questions, please ask, or else we are going to end up the sessions. Dear participants, anyone want to ask a question? No
I think
one.
we're done.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am, for giving a wonderful, valuable information regarding crime scene management and forensic ballistic, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank
Thank you.
you. I covered as much as I could. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And I would like to thank all our entire forensic team